All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Lori Tucker here, along with our legal analyst, Greg Isaacs, and our illustrious entrepreneurial sort of executive producer, Jeff McClain.
Thank you.
I was trying to think of all these flowery ways.
Please don't take any business advice from me.
But we are going to get legal advice.
Eating a bowl of adjectives for breakfast. I mean, that was an introduction, yes.
We have kind of a lighthearted but yet serious overtones here.
We do.
For spring break coming up. No, it's not yet. It's a couple of weeks away.
Less than 2 weeks.
Is it less than 2 weeks now?
March 11th through March 15th for Knox County Schools and University of Tennessee.
Well, there we go. See, that's what he brings to the table, everybody. Dates and important things. But we're talking about the fact that you're still getting your hotel rooms booked, maybe last minute plans and that kind of thing. And you do need to remember, you got to stay out of trouble. You could pay for a lifetime.
You've got to stay out of trouble. And, you know, spring break, it's that time of the year. Everybody's excited. The weather's starting to break, thanks to Ken Weathers and crew. But, you know, when you go on spring break, there are a lot of things you need to be mindful of. And, you know, one, and the big thing, and what I see is when people go south, go to Florida, go out of the country, go on a cruise, you know, one, you have two things that are unfortunately synonymous, and that is underage spring breakers and alcohol.
Yeah, number one, that's what you always think about.
The number one thing. So, you know, let's just start with a premise. You know, remember what the law is where you are. So in Tennessee, obviously it's against the law to drink until you're 21. You can't carry open carry a firearm unless you're 21 or older. But having said that, just to kind of compare what could happen if a state such as Florida had a similar law like Tennessee, underage possession or consumption. Now that sounds pretty benign for spring break because, Lori, I mean, I know you don't want to hear it, but everybody is probably going to be, if you're underage, consuming an alcoholic beverage.
You don't like to think about it, no. And we'll talk about this in a second. Parents can get in trouble as well. If you take your kids on spring break, hey, we'll be in the hotel room if you need anything, and yet they're often providing. And
so, you know, in Tennessee, if you're under 21, you lose your license for a year under the Youthful Offenders Act. The law enforcement's required within 5 days to notify the Department of Safety. If you provide alcohol to a minor. And this is what happens. Sometimes you go on spring break and you find out that the curfew's a little earlier than you thought. Some places like Seaside, Daytona have incredibly harsh and early curfews. But for example, in Tennessee, if you provide alcohol to someone underage, it is a $1,000 fine, mandatory 100 hours of community service. This is for handing that person the beer out of your cooler. And it's up to the discretion of the judge whether you lose your license for a year. So just as a backdrop, think about underage drinking and providing alcohol to underage spring breakers when you go to the beach this spring break.
Well, and that's the thing. You go out of town, you know, most people, as we've discussed, the big destination is Florida. And so you go out of town, that complicates things if you get in trouble in a very big way.
Especially, you know, whether it's even something as simple as a speeding ticket could come back to haunt you later on down the line.
It is. And let's talk about how prolific it is. Unfortunately, you know, what we see in spring break in the state of Florida, fatalities involving alcohol increased 19%. Last year in Panama City, there were 400 arrests, which is a decrease from the year before, 44%. Miami Beach, 488 arrests, 110 of them were for firearms. But here's where the problem typically happens. So young spring breaker goes down to the beach, he gets caught underage drinking, gets a DUI, may or may not want to tell mom and dad, because obviously mom and dad are not going to be very happy with their little spring breaker. 47 states have the interstate compact on driver's licenses and driving privileges. And what does that mean? That means if you get in trouble in another forum or another state, it's not going to happen immediately, but if you get your license revoked, they're going to notify the state of Tennessee, and you're going to get in trouble here. Underage drinking and consumption, the same way. You could enter a plea to a lower level court and unknowingly lose your privileges to drive here in the state of Tennessee. So, it's very important when you go on spring break to know that there are a lot of consequences if you break the law.
So we're talking about speeding. We're talking about underage alcohol consumption. Now there is a new phenomenon out there: legalized marijuana.
And it's come closer to our borders. Actually, the laws have changed not all that long ago, to where there's some variation of legalized cannabis in all but 3 of our border states. And so, in fact, Illinois, it's not just medical. Most of the other places it's medical, but in Illinois it's recreational. But the law's not that same back here.
And it used to be when we did these spots, when I represented young people who get in trouble on spring break, it's the alcohol consumption, marijuana, etc. wasn't as prevalent. But now there is some confusion legally. There's some confusion at state versus federal legal requirements. But just know, if you go to a spring break venue where marijuana or gummies is legal, that does not give you the right to take it across state lines, which could be unknowingly and unwittingly a federal offense called trafficking. So just remember, because you're in Florida doesn't mean it changes the law when you get back to Tennessee or somewhere else. The other thing, though, if we look at Miami and 110 young people arrested for firearms, Tennessee's an open carry state.
Yeah.
A lot of states are not. So just be mindful that when you leave the state or leave the country on spring break, not only the time changes, but the law changes.
And another point to make there, this year, in the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous rise in the number of guns confiscated at TSA checkpoints. You can ascribe whatever rationale you want, but if it is illegal, your right to open carry a firearm definitely ends at the TSA checkpoint, and people forget it. They pack it in their bag, they didn't think about it, or it's it's in the car.
They get casual about it. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that is a great point. When you go on spring break and you in places like Tennessee, you get used to and you get familiar with having a firearm in your car, on your person when you travel. But let me tell you, TSA is extraordinarily vigilant, and those laws have teeth. A quick anecdote: a sweet client of mine had retired from the railroad after 30 years. They gave him an engraved Derringer that would fit in the palm of your hand. He put it in the bottom of his shaving kit. 30 years later, gets on an airplane to see the grandkids.
Oh, no.
He was escorted to the Blount County Jail.
Oh.
Yeah. And
how did that end?
It with a lot of common sense.
Yeah.
After we explained the dynamic, but the point is, there was and is zero tolerance. Jeff, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, before we let you go, let's talk about some of the other spring break shenanigans that can get you in trouble. We're talking about, well, this is involving alcohol consumption, but trashing your hotel room. I mean, just not being a good citizen when you go to another
How many
place.
times do you get the call, my son or my daughter all were signed on this reservation or whatever, and now it is trash. Just remember, spring break, it's kind of like Halloween. It's not a legal excuse to be stupid or not commit a crime. And the stats in looking at spring break, New Orleans is projected to be the #1 spot this year. Safest places, Fort Lauderdale and the Keys.
Okay.
But it is estimated that the average male spring breaker will consume 18 alcoholic beverages per day. But don't take this as being discriminatory. The average female spring breaker will consume probably 10 alcoholic beverages per day, and they will at least throw up or be amnestic or blackout once. So that is a crime wave waiting to happen. But the other thing, it's amazing, it's kind of like the salmon swimming upstream in Alaska and they don't see the bear or whatever. law enforcement knows you're coming.
Yes, they
So,
are ready.
They are ready.
They're looking for you.
And not just law enforcement. I mean, we talk about this as, a kid out there with just having fun and breaking the law, but there are criminals. There are people who are looking to
That's a
exploit
good
you
point,
at this
too.
time of year.
You're
and
a
they
moving
know
target.
and they know where to go. There's plenty of
Jeff, you're 2 for 2, and places like remember the unfortunate story of Natalie Holloway
Yes.
in Aruba at the bar something in Charlie's.
Carlos and Charlie's.
Carlos and Charlie's.
There are predators that are waiting for the innocent spring breaker that's having the time of their life.
Yeah.
So not only do you need to be cognizant about breaking the law yourself, but don't put yourself where you're in a position to be overly vulnerable and be the victim of some unfortunate crime. And then let's not forget about jumping off balconies into pools, just the usual spring break frivolity.
Don't do it.
But don't drive. Had a guy a couple years ago,
Yeah.
smart, is not going to drive. Got a DUI on a golf cart.
Oh, no.
Just remember, as many crazy scenarios as you can come up with being a carefree spring breaker, law enforcement has got just as many tools in their bag to catch you.
My parents may have been onto something those many years ago. I was never allowed to go on spring break with my girlfriends. My parents took me to Florida for a family vacation.
There's fun there. You can have some fun that way.
I mean,
Well,
I'm not going to sanction that, but I mean that's fun. I took my kids on spring break once, and it was the worst punishment I ever
Yeah.
self-inflicted because we wound up being
I'm sure my parents felt the same
the
way.
full-time hall monitors.
yes.
Well,
We've done that with my girls too, and we have sat in a parking lot waiting for them to come out of the
Yeah,
venue.
two questions:
Yeah.
Are you doing this, or have you been doing that? And,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm confident the
entire
answer is
time.
we're not truthful, but
We just want everybody to stay safe.
Yeah.
and have fun, get
Yeah.
a great tan, enjoy the break from school, but don't leave common sense behind. Don't forget to pack your sunscreen. Don't forget to pack your common sense and mom and dad's credit card. And everybody be safe.
And remember, reality is waiting
Right.
the following week.
All right.
All right, let's talk more about this coming up at 5:30.
Thanks for
Let's
being
do
here,
it.
Greg.
Yes, thank you.